let's look at the way we influence. If we can distinguish between good and bad influences on the basis of the way we influence people. And obviously this cannot be black and white, so there is a big gray area. But I think that it's helpful to think about that in this way, that we have instrumental influences, and that the outcome is more important than the person, and intrinsic influences, the personal change, more important than an immediate outcome. What do you think about that? Is that clear what I have in mind? So instrumental influences is that basically you try by any means to get a person to actually take or absorb your point, or do something that you want them to do. Intrinsic influence is that basically the making a change or helping the person to grow and change may be more important than the outcome. Does that make sense at all?
I'm thinking in regards to my profession. So I'm a fundraising manager for a charity, and you know, we wouldn't seek to achieve instrumental influence over people. We wouldn't want to get the money out of them regardless of how it was done or the effect it had upon them. We try to, you know, to positively show people the joy of giving, and give them lots of different ways to do it and inspire them to, but but we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't seek to fleece somebody of their cash, regardless of the impact.
So you have a name, but you are saying you are not trying to manipulate people. Or it doesn't matter?
I would say, well, manipulate feels like a word that I wouldn't want to use as a charity fundraiser, but I would certainly want to influence people to understand and to want to feel that supporting the work of our charity was worthwhile.
You see, so this is very, yeah, thank you. This is very interesting example, because you have sort of instrumental end, which is getting money, but what you're trying to actually influence people, not just to achieve that end, or to achieve that end via influencing people, via making people understand things, via making people see the value of what your charity is doing and things like that. So this is what I mean by intrinsic. So you are basically, you are influencing people and with some sort of outcome. Manipulation would be actually trying to achieve the same outcome, but without care for the person. So I only, what matters to me, that I get that money, I don't care what sort of effect I have on that person, or how that person would, if that would help them to grow and develop or something like that. That's irrelevant. Okay, so these are those two types of influence, and let's see first of all a kind of influence, that subcategories of instrumental influence, which is overt influence. This is threats, punishment, reward, something like that. So you try to force people in a way to do what you want them to do. So we sometimes use that with children and things like that. Can you give me an example of overt influence on the like something that's maybe happening right now, recently?
Well, the law would be an example of a threat.
Yes, yes, law, certainly, yes.
Yeah, the police enforcing like COVID rules.
Yeah, yeah. And there are all sorts of things like that that is happening. For example, let's say, you know, demonstrations or some violent demonstrations that try to influence, sort of influence people or political change through violence means, through like force, if you like. Oh, can somebody? So this is quite common and happens again, what Yannick mentioned before, on the right and on the left, but most often on the far right and far left, you have this situation that people just try to influence, try to force, try to make you believe them what they think that is right. And we have an extreme example of that was, for example, for instance, a cultural revolution in China, where young people tried to influence everybody by force, and they would ask their professors or teachers to confess that they're against revolution, try to sort of change their minds in that way. And this is sometimes happen actually to a lesser extent in the West too, with some sort of way young people try to forcefully make a change or influence political system or some sort of impose some sort of social issues. That's very often is behind that is some sort of righteousness or righteous anger and things like that. However, what we know that this change, this kind of influence is not very effective. What happens that people do not respond to that well, they suppress things. If those forces have some sort of power, they suppress their views or feelings or whatever, and don't change them. These things come out again once the pressure is not there. Now we have also covert influence, like sweet talk, flirtation, emotional blackmail, trying to do something, sort of try to get you on board with something nice, and then they put at the end some sort of argument for something that really matters to them. Do you know any example of that? Have you had your partner trying to influence you by flirting with you or sweet talk or something like that?
I hate to say it, but there's sometimes you meet those charity fundraisers on the street and they do behave like that.
Yes, exactly. I recently, my editor suggested to watch a documentary called Thrive 2. Has anybody watched Thrive? No? Okay, so this is basically effectively a right-wing propaganda made by hair of a big American health and beauty company, one of the biggest in the United States. And it's very interesting for me. What was very interesting that I guess first 3/4 of the movie, you would probably agree with everything that they're saying. They have, you know, in the movie, it's very glossy, very nicely done, beautifully filmed, and all things like we have to eradicate poverty and climate change and nature and all these things that are very sort of popular nowadays. And only in the last quarter, you get like the real message that they want to spread, which is like abolishing taxation and that sort of stuff, like you know, a weak government and this usual classic right-wing libertarian philosophy. So it was very interesting to me that they had really tried to, first of all, get you on their side with sweet talk, and they spend most of the time on that, and only at the end they would come with a real message. And this is something that is used very, very often. Where Trump is using that all the time, many politicians are using that all the time.
Cults and religions.
Who is saying that? Who was that?
Me.
Religion, yes. I mean, to some extent, religion too, although religion is more complex because it links, it has other things that that matter too. Okay, any questions, any comments about this? If not, let's move to now intrinsic influence. And again, there are two types of, or two categories of intrinsic influence, which is indirect influence by example. This is really, I think, one of the best influences and one of the most ethical influences, I would say, probably, because you actually influence people by simply walking your talk. So rather than talking to people, you just do what you think that is right, and then hope that that would influence others. So this, for example, is much more effective when bringing up children, because children tend to copy as a form of influence than, let's say, threats or punishment or rewards, which are overt instrumental influence. And when bringing up children, it's really important that influence is intrinsic rather than instrumental, which we very often get wrong, not only with parents, but particularly in education. Now, in education, we have mostly, education is nowadays based on instrumental influences, reward and punishment, passing exams, that sort of stuff, which is why education is such a dire strait. So this is example, and you know, however, example is sort of not easy. It takes time, and it's not always possible. You can't influence. Well, you can actually influence your friends on Facebook by particular way that you write, argue, and so on. So it is possible, but it's not always easy, and it's not always available. So the other type of influence is the direct intrinsic influence, which can be prescriptive. So you basically advise people. Is that okay? Is this something that you do often? I guess this is quite common, to actually be prescriptive and say to people what is right, just being very straight about these things. Confronting is also another type when we challenge others. With, let's say you challenge your friend or somebody that you think that he or she is doing something wrong. Informative, you provide information. Supportive, you basically support them to get to to make a decision. And probably the most interesting is catalytic. Basically, you help people to come to their own conclusions. This is known as Socrates dialogue or Socrates questioning, and is basically much more effective. We know that it's much more effective than prescriptive, than giving advice, because people are when people think, then something is coming from them. They are far more willing to accept that and to follow it up. So anything you want to ask about these various types of influence? Yeah, Lucy?
Give us some examples of the catalytic influence.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you try to persuade your friend something. Give me an example of what would that be. Let's say you think that she's in a wrong type of relationship, Would that be a good example? Okay, so prescriptive would mean that you tell her you are in the wrong type of relationship, you need to leave that guy, or you need to leave that person, right? Okay, now catalytic would involve asking questions. So imagine that you are that person and I'm your friend, and I think you are in wrong type of the relationship. So rather than telling you, you need to leave that relationship, I would ask you something like, Lucy, how do you feel about being in that relationship? And then you may say, yeah, I feel great, I love him, but he doesn't treat me well. It's something like that, right? Then I would follow that with further questions. Like, okay, in what way he doesn't treat you well? How does it fit with your own values, with what you think that is right? And by asking these questions, I help you to come to the conclusion that maybe this is not the right relationship for you, without actually telling you that. And this is very often used in psychotherapy, counseling, and things like that. Counseling is actually not the right term, because counseling means giving advice, but counselors don't give advice. They actually skillfully ask questions to help people to come to their own conclusions. That okay? Okay, anybody else? Any other question or comment? Okay, let's move on then. So what do we take of that? I mean, I don't accept that, I don't expect that you will remember all these categories and names and things like that. So I want to just offer something very practical that you can remember in situations of influence, either influencing others or being influenced by others. So what I think you can take with you from the previous slide is just basically, when you just remember about that instrumental intrinsic, when you try to influence somebody, just ask yourself, do I want an immediate outcome, or do I want to help that person grow? So this is really, this makes a really difference. Even if it's something very simple. So let's say you feel that your partner is not doing enough of house chores, let's say doing washing up or something like that, and you want to influence, you want them to do more of washing up or something like that. Well, is that the most important, or is it more important that you help them grow and understand that sort of more balanced share of house chores is really important? So just ask yourself that next time when you try to influence somebody. Is it the outcome more important of the person, or the person is more important of the outcome? And same applies when you feel that somebody is trying to influence you. Ask, do they want an immediate outcome, or do they want to help me grow? And then you will actually, that will help you to determine how to respond to those people who try to influence you. So in a way, even if we take a larger picture, we're talking about Brexit and influence of, let's say, Nigel Farage or something like that. To me, it was like immediately clear they don't give a damn about me or other people. They just want an outcome. So they're using all possible means to get to that outcome with complete disregard to people. And unfortunately, it worked. But for me, it was easy to disregard them because it was so clear that their influence is instrumental. Any questions or any comments? Anybody want to say anything? Okay, then let's move to the how of influence. So how we can influence others. Is that something that you would like to talk about at all?
Yes.
Okay. So, and we are talking here about influencing others in sort of, if you like, assuming that it is going to be in an ethical way. Although many of these things can be used to do something to influence people unethically too. So I'll just leave it, the question of ethics, to you. So first point is walk your talk. This is, I already mentioned that your action and behavior may have more profound effect than words. Then trust. Trust is really important. If you want to influence somebody, it's much easier if they trust you. If there is that sort of atmosphere of trust, openness, safety. So first of all, create that atmosphere of trust and openness. Acceptance. It's very, very hard to influence somebody who you don't accept. You don't need you don't need to like that person. You don't need to be completely like enamored with that person or anything like that, but you need to accept the person as he or she is. Common ground. This is really, really important. If you want to influence somebody, first try to find what you already share. What is the common ground? I mean, this is, I have to say, this is one of the major ways of the politicians in the United States, particularly the right wing, the Republicans, the major ways of influencing people to vote for them. They always start from the point, oh, okay, so you are against abortion. I'm against abortion. That's what we have in common. And then they try to persuade them to do or vote for something that is against their interest. So common ground is really, really important. Ask rather than tell. This is, again, that difference that I explained between telling people what to do and just asking questions and trying to help them get to their own conclusions. Try to see things from their own perspective. And this is, I think, this picture really, this sort of diagram, really, it's I think, good representation of how of a good influence, or I can even say probably of most profound influences. So basically, you know, when we talk to each other, we sort of start from one position and that person starts from another position, and it's always like a fighting with like desire to win. But the point is that winning is actually not necessarily a good thing. If you win, that doesn't mean that you actually influence that person. It doesn't mean that the person will change anything. In fact, you most likely, when you win your argument, you're going to alienate that person. So the point here is, rather than doing that, you actually go to that person, go to try to see things, understand and see things from their perspective. And then when you're there, you both may walk to to your starting point. Does that make sense? Does that make sense as a difference from what we normally do? Anybody wants to come in at this point? Any questions or comments?
Nash, this is Nick. I've got a general question.
Hi, Nick. Good to see you.
Sorry, I'm being very quiet. I'm catching up with my work for the day. I'm sorry. The general question is, you talked about Socratic style being like the most influential, or, you know, and it's something that you're a master of. And I think I've asked you this before. So can you teach us how to do it, please? or what is a good resource for us, you know, to learn how to do that well?
Okay. Well, let's see. We have 3 minutes left. I can do that in 3 minutes. Okay. So. Okay, this is how to, not just Socrates dialogue, but this is, again, the previous slide may be a little bit complicated, and you certainly what is this now? Sorry. Oops. Sorry, can you still see the slides?
Yep.
What do you see?
I see PowerPoint, so I see
The
your slides
question,
on there.
the first slide, the question from the beginning.
No. Okay, so I want you to see this slide. So basically, the previous one, I think, again, I don't certainly expect that in the heat of the situation when you want to influence somebody or something like that, you'll remember all these points. They are all important, but they only become natural to practice and things like that. So again, I want you to take something from this session that that is easy to remember. And this thing is this. So even if you don't remember anything from the previous slide, just consider what is effective and what is not in influencing you. And apply the same when you try to influence somebody else. So basically, when you want to influence somebody, just turn the table and ask yourself, okay, what would be effective way effective way for somebody else to influence me in a similar situation? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you, let's bring again the same example, you want to influence your friend because you think he's in a toxic relationship or something like that. Now, rather than thinking how to persuade them with some sort of, I don't know, rational argument or something like that, think about if you were in that sort of situation and your friend tried to persuade you, what would be effective, what would be the best way to do it. And you will see that you will actually come sort of spontaneously, you will come to some of these things above. You wouldn't, most likely you wouldn't say, oh, I would like my friend to tell me what to do. That's very unlikely. So think about that. And this is the way to remember these things, and this is the way to find the best possible way to influence others. However, there is one thing that is really worth mentioning, which is basically, if you do that in the way that I described, there is actually, because when you go to the other side and you try to see things from the perspective of the other person, you may end up, rather than influencing, you may end up being influenced. And you have to be open to that possibility too. This is really, really very important. I would say, don't try to influence others if you are not open, at least to some degree, to be influenced. Thank you very much.